Shall we move on to Ninotchka?
I think so.
So, Ninotchka is from 1939, I want to say.
Spoilers, we since this is a new movie, if you
Yes.
haven't seen this movie that was made in 1939, we may spoil it, and any other movie we mention, we may spoil as well.
It is directed by Ernst Lubitsch. It stars Greta Garbo and Melvyn Douglas. Billy Wilder has a writing credit, as well as some other people who are probably famous in their own right, but mostly people will know Billy Wilder. Um, and I did the plot for the last one, so this is you.
Bela Lugosi also shows up for like a
Yes.
few minutes, which was interesting. He is most famous for the 1930s Dracula, and also Plan 9 from Outer Space and his relationship to Ed Wood. So Ninotchka is about, this is a little more complicated than It Happened One Night. Ninotchka is about,
I did that on purpose.
you did that on purpose. So basically there's some, the Russian royal family was overthrown really not that long ago when you think about the fact that this is a 1939 movie, and there are some jewels that belong to a Russian heiress of some kind.
Or do they?
Or do they? That show up in Paris with a group of Russian men. During the conflict over who really owns the jewels and who can sell them, a Russian envoy played by Greta Garbo and a French, I don't know what Melvyn Douglas is, lawyer get into, fall in love and get into conflict because she needs those jewels to pay for Russian things, and he is friends with this heiress. But love conquers all, and that's kind of it. I don't know what else to bring into it.
That's kind
As
of
far
it.
as the plot goes.
So this is, I think, I'm not sure if this is my first Garbo. I'm trying to think of, like, I'm looking at her Wikipedia, and it's like, I actually don't think I've seen most of these. I've seen, I think she's the one, she's in Grand Hotel, right? So I've seen her in Grand Hotel.
Yes.
Isn't she the one in the Blue Angel, or is that someone else?
That's Marlene Dietrich.
Oh, I see. I get her and Dietrich mixed up for some reason. I don't know why. Um, anyways,
European women is
European women,
in early Hollywood. What are we saying here?
I don't know. Ninotchka is, I want to hear what you have to say about this first, probably, but I do want to say that Ninotchka is an odd little movie. And Ernst, I'm getting the picture that Ernst Lubitsch might have done better in a later era where he wasn't constrained by the code. Because Ernst Lubitsch, we've seen To Be or Not to Be. I've seen that years ago, and it's kind of an odd movie that's got like a play in it about Hitler, and it's ultimately like a pro-American film. It's very odd. And then the To Be
Trouble in Paradise.
Trouble in Paradise, which is like two thieves who fall in love. And then he did a segment in an anthology movie called If I Had a Million, which I really like his segment. And it is, I think, the shortest segment, but it's really just an amusing segment. I don't think there's even any dialogue in it. So it's like, I wonder what Ernst Lubitsch would have done in a modern era.
Yeah. Well,
so that's my one little.
Well, Billy Wilder's a little that way too. I mean, you watch early Kubrick and you're like, he's being restrained.
Yeah, but more than like Capra or Wilder, like I think Ernst Lubitsch really suffered from being in the era that he was in.
Well, we just talked about It Happened One Night, which, as we said a little too many times, I think is a very like solid rom-com that it's just a very comfortable, it has all the tropes and so on. This is a rom-com that does something more. And I don't have anything against just a lighthearted, fun reporter meets heiress rom-com. I think that's lovely. But if you want doing something a little more unique and a little different, this is definitely more your kind of movie. But yeah, I still see parallels to stuff happening now. A very popular K-drama recently was called Crash Landing on You. I haven't actually watched it, but a South Korean woman ends up accidentally in North Korea and falls in love with a North Korean man, but because of the politics of North Korea, that, he can't just leave. And I have read enough to know that, they have to come up with an interesting solution to this problem to stay together. And so in this case, you have strongly Soviet Russia, which, Stalin, is in power, and a guy in Paris, and like culturally, it's going to be very hard for them to be together, because you if you're in Russia, you stay in Russia. And she does believe in the Russian cause strongly in the beginning, I think less so later. But even when she stops believing in the Russian cause, she's still Russian. I mean, that's where I think you get a little hung up sometimes, in that you see people acting a certain way and think that this is an offensive stereotype, but the truth is we culturally behave certain ways. You're raised in a culture, we live in a society, Americans tend to be a certain way and so on, and it has to do with what you're raised around. Now, the problem happens when you only see one version, when that gets made fun of, when those characters aren't fleshed out, they're just a parody of themselves and that kind of thing. And I thought he did a pretty good job of you know, there is a point to some of the Soviet rhetoric. There is a truth to it. You know, the royal families did just get to have money while other people didn't, and that was it. But Soviet Russia had a lot of problems too. I mean, Stalin was, and there's a lot of jokes about that. There's jokes about how little the Russian people have, and the way they're expected to share it, and the way it's tense because people might report on you. Like, he had some political commentary in there, and it's you don't find a ton of rom-coms that have political commentary in them, but they exist. It was interesting how long it took for her to show up, because you really start with these three Russian men that show up with the jewels and Melvyn Douglas's character, and then she shows up. And then later, he disappears when she ends up going back to Russia as part of a deal to get the jewels. And I kind of liked how little conflict there was to that. Like, he knew who she was and why she'd done it, and he wasn't really angry with her about that. And she, even though in a sense she'd betrayed him, she still loved him, and she was just honoring herself. And the conflict at that point was because she's in Russia and he's in Paris, and he can't get into Russia. They will not let him go in. So he has to come up with this crazy way to get her out. And I thought that was all really well done. I was impressed by it.
I basically agree with everything you said, even the part about me getting, wigged out by certain things. It's that thing where it's a question of authenticity, and like, this movie isn't asking you to take it that seriously, so it ultimately doesn't bother me that much. At the same time, like, there's no one Russian playing anybody who's Russian. Now, we don't necessarily think about that a lot because they're all white and they're all European of some kind. They're European ancestry, so you don't have someone in blackface or yellowface or anything like that, which is more objectionable. But it's still somebody, Greta Garbo, I think, was German born.
She's Swedish.
So, she's not Russian. That's fine. I don't think playing across culture when you're that close to the culture is as objectionable.
The waiter is a Russian.
Excellent.
Russian-American actor. The three Soviet agents are all German. Claire is American. Melvyn Douglas is playing a French guy. He was born in Macon, Georgia. So
right. So it's like, it's one of those things where, again, this is 39, so you shrug. I mean, there probably weren't really that many Russian actors even in Hollywood necessarily. I don't know for a fact or anything. So I kind of, you kind of let that go. But it is a thing where I question, like, certainly, Gone with the Wind is more objectionable, right?
Yes.
But there is a part of me that watches this and I'm like, there's nobody Russian in these roles, and these are all kind of Russian caricatures. I mean, Melvyn Douglas also is kind of a French caricature, although he's barely French, so it's kind of harder.
Yeah, he doesn't have a French accent or anything.
So it's like, I don't have as much to object there because it's by omission, so it's like still objectionable, but for different reasons maybe. But it's not really asking to be taken that seriously, and it's ultimately, it does have a political viewpoint. So it's kind of making fun of communism. It's making fun of communism. It's making fun of capitalism. It ultimately sides with capitalism, but it's not without like asking questions. That's not as, maybe interesting as a movie that's really going after both of them, but it's also not a movie that's trying to do that, so I don't need it or want it to do that. But there is something where, like, this is 1939's version of Russian people. And of course, and I think at the time, I don't know how much Americans even knew that Stalin was like having tons and tons of people killed. I mean, there's a joke in there about like less
There's a lot of
Russians.
references to being sent to Siberia, which was kind of
Right.
a
So
thing
it's
that
like,
happened.
so that, I mean, there's a question in culture right now, and I don't have an answer to it where we're like, well, what can we make jokes about? What can't we? You know, is
Yeah,
it how we make the jokes? Is it how, you know, are we joking too soon about something? How serious is this joke? Is this
right.
joke trying to say something? Are we just making light of a situation? And so I'm curious, like I'm re-examining some of these older movies in that lens. It's not about it, and it's also not about it being fair or not to examine an older movie in these lens. I don't really care. I'm going to do what I want,
Yeah.
but I'm also not going to be like, oh, this is a movie from '39 is super problematic. It's Jesus, that was
But
a
it's
good
also
movie.
fascinating that he was making these political movies because to be or not to be is also very political.
Yeah,
In 1939, which is right, you know, is the middle of the war. Like you said, Stalin is just, I don't know. That's the thing about Russia sometimes is that, you know, the leaders of Russia kill more Russians than people outside of Russia do
right. Yeah,
sometimes.
no, it's not as
Stalin just
crazy.
killed so many Russians.
Well, and it's we aren't in the war yet, but I think we're selling munitions and stuff to
Yeah,
people. This might
I'm
be
hazy
around
on
when
dates. Yeah,
Russia might not be at war with Germany at this point because they did sign like a peace treaty. My history is not as solid as my movie history,
but like, can
my
you
world history.
imagine right now a movie? I mean, we had The Big Sick, which was about Kumail Nanjiani's romance with I would say Emma Stone, but that's not true. With his
No.
wife,
Yeah.
um, Emma Gordon, I think is her name.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Maybe.
um,
You look that up.
oh, I'm spelling his name wrong. Emily Gordon.
Yeah.
And he's Pakistani. But can you imagine, like, I don't know, a
A
movie about
Chinese man and an American woman or something,
yeah,
or
and
vice versa, or
not
whatever.
a Chinese American, but like a and we're not doing that, and that's even why sometimes I look to LGBT and or K-drama because as conservatives K-drama will be at times, like they do have a romance between a North and South Korean as one of their huge hits. Like there's a number of LGBT movies about white for whatever usually they're often European, so white European men with refugees from usually Middle Eastern places, and you're not seeing that in mainstream. They are, you know, we had Always Be My Maybe, we are Crazy Rich Asians, and I think Sylvie's Love. Like there are more American experiences where we're admitting that American is not always white movies being made, which is
Is
good.
I think more or at least close to equal white as non-white, if not more non-white than white.
Yeah, but it just like, you know, I like, you know, I like seeing more edgy, controversial. Like I wish it weren't. I wish we just had those kind of romances more.
I can't really. I mean, I'm not that I.
And I like, sorry, real quick, because we've talked so much about the political, social aspect, you know, he just falls in love with her for her. He thinks it's awesome that she killed a Polish lancer who stabbed her. Like she is this tough lady. And then he gets her to laugh later. So there's some, you know, we're talking a lot about the political stuff, but there's some good funny stuff. There's a whole thing where she feels like she's betrayed Russia. And when she goes back, she's going to meet a firing squad. So he fakes a firing squad by tying a handkerchief. He leans her up against the wall, ties a handkerchief around her eyes, kisses her, and then pops a champagne bottle and she falls down. And it's
That's
hysterical.
it's. I don't. I mean, that could someone could tell me that there's nothing funny about that and it's super problematic, and I just have to be like, hey, I'm human. That is
No,
one
but
of the
I mean,
funniest things I've ever seen.
humor can be subversive and used to, you know, I mean, sometimes you gotta laugh at things, and
Yeah.
the truth is, as a Russian in that era, you may have died for not getting you may have been put up against a firing squad. So let's laugh about the absurdity of that in the,
No,
you know,
totally.
like
Yeah. I think, you know, I imagine like anything culture is sorting out like what it is that you can and can't do, and mostly just by audiences appreciating or not appreciating it. And I appreciated that joke in this. It
yeah,
is one of the funniest things I've seen recently, just in my memory.
yeah,
And like, there's, you know, trying to think of movies where you get a culture clash like this, and like Crazy Rich Asians does it to a
right.
degree. My Big Fat Greek Wedding does it, but there's
Hmm.
nothing nothing particularly political about either of those movies. Socio-political, maybe, between
I'm
like
thinking of oh my God, how did I Just Between Friends, right? Just
what?
Friends, Just Friends, Just Friends.
Oh, is that the Seth Rogen and Charlize?
No, you're way off. That is the Dutch gay romance
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure, yeah.
where he's a rich Dutch guy
Yeah.
and he's an immigrant. I can't remember I think he's Syrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, Just Friends, the Dutch movie. I mean, that's a little bit of a culture clash, but that was way more fluffy. That was very
Well,
fluffy.
so is My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah.
Crazy Rich Asians too, though it tries to be more pointed. I'm not entirely sure it succeeds, but that's a different conversation.
Cane River.
Cane River. That's not recent, but yes.
It has a culture clash. I'm just saying.
It does. That's like 50 years old, but you're totally right.
I was just thinking of culture clashes, period.
But like, or there's, what was that? The half of it?
But it's funny because Cane River and Crazy Rich Asians almost goes to the kind of culture clash you see in It Happened One Night, because really it's within a certain...
It's kind of like subgroups within a group. I mean,
right.
It's more complicated than that, but
Crazy
that is
Rich
kind
Asians,
of what it is.
They are both East Asian, but one of them is very, very wealthy. I mean, that's the clash, and It Happened One Night. She is very wealthy, but
one of them is American. I think she's Chinese. I forget what her actual heritage is, but she's American Asian, and he's actually, what is it? Oh shoot, is it Indonesia?
No, Singapore.
He's Singapore Chinese American kind of, except isn't he also, I forget if he has a British accent.
We are missing the nuances of this and should not talk about it like we know what we're talking about.
No, basically, yeah, but they are kind of subgroups within a larger group. At least that's how the movie is portraying it, whether or not it's actually that true.
Right,
whatever.
Versus what we were talking about earlier is like, wouldn't it be interesting to see a movie about, I mean, I was almost thinking someone American or British or something like that, and someone who is born and raised in China or Iran or a place with more.
What if you had somebody what if you had somebody who is of Israeli heritage with somebody who is of, I don't know, pick a non-Israeli country in the Middle East, and like, that could be.
I think there have been some of those, but they are not funny. They are
right.
Not,
they're not rom-coms.
They are not rom-coms.
So it's like you. I mean, even that's kind of subgroups within a group. But anyways, yeah, it's. I think Ninotchka is ultimately very enjoyable. Ernst Lubitsch also has a really. Sorry, I'm trying to bring us back to that. We've gone to a broader discussion. I'm trying to narrow us back in. Ernst Lubitsch.
I do that to us sometimes.
I was talking about how Capra is like a warm blanket, especially with his filmmaking and his traditional sort of stuff. Ernst Lubitsch is not really like traditional Hollywood. He is, because you were more limited by the cameras and stuff. You didn't have as much ability to. Are you laughing at your cat? Because she's like, yes. You had more ability. You have more ability now to do different things, and you didn't necessarily in the 30s. But Ernst Lubitsch is still like doing different like setups. He's doing. There's this visual gag right at the beginning with this one guy coming in and talking to someone and then leaving, and then another guy who's dressed just like him coming in, and it's through this revolving door, and you're just looking at the revolving door, and it's like, that's not really how you'd shoot that. I think like he's shooting that in a way that is more unique for the era.
Yeah.
And I just like there's something very visual to the jokes that Ernst Lubitsch is doing. Like, a lot of it is still like the firing squad joke is a very visual joke. There's no words in that joke, basically.
Right.
Except for the lead up to it.
The setup,
The setup. And it's like, and I love it when people are using film to make the jokes.
Right.
I mean, that's why, what's his name? Edgar Wright is so popular, is because he uses the visuals a lot to make jokes. It isn't a movie where it's just two comedians riffing off each other and there's nothing really particularly filmic about it, and so it's like, even though a lot of the jokes are wordplay and stuff, it's still nice when you see like Melvyn Douglas is in that restaurant and he's trying to get this, Ninotchka to be interested in him, and she doesn't like any of his word jokes. And the way he makes her laugh is by slipping and falling, which is almost kind of like that's a universal thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't get hurt. He just slips and falls and spills stuff everywhere.
It's
and
awkward and embarrassing and kind of funny.
And it's like, I can't, I'm wondering, is there a culture somewhere that wouldn't find that funny? It's like, I don't find slapstick stuff funny, but like, I can't imagine there's got to be someone in basically every walk of life on earth who probably find that funny, right? The whole point, I think, is that joke is kind of universal. It's slapstick, someone falls and spills a bunch of stuff, and she laughs at it. And that's what finally breaks her barriers down. And it's a great moment. It's great writing, and it's great setup and great plotting and pacing and all that. It's got all the stuff. And it's about this universality thing, of the joke and of meeting together. So Ernst Lubitsch, I think, really adds something to this. Even though I don't love his other movies, he is a very visual director, and I really appreciate that in this movie.
Yeah, I think my last thing to say, I agree with you, and my last thing to say about it is just her character. I mean, we've remarked that his character is good. It almost follows what we talked about with some of the LGBTQIA plus stuff, where he's mostly just a nice guy. There's a little bit of a love triangle because of his involvement with the Russian heiress that's not really explored, and I'm kind of fine with that. It didn't need to be.
No.
It wasn't that kind of movie. But her, both because of her character, her acting, and how it was written, like, she could be the stereotype. She could just be the cold Soviet Russian lady, which is a stereotype. But there's a depth to her, and I like that she doesn't lose her edge ever. Like but you see the warmer side to her, but it also, to me, it felt like she was letting him see that side to her, not that he was like changing her. And I like that. And I like that later when she's in Russia, she's still got this like stoic kind of affectation, which seems to just be her, as she's in her apartment dealing with people. But, her friends come in and she gets excited and warm with them, the three men that we've been following this whole time. But she's still got this toughness to her. Like if a Polish Lancer came at her again, she would still take him down. And I think they did a tough lady really well without making her one-dimensional or losing her toughness.
One of the last things I want to talk about too is what you're talking about. Often one of the things, like, I don't find the gender dynamics as objectionable in this as I do in maybe any number of other movies. Not really It Happened One Night. There's not a whole lot there, but like one of the reasons for that is this is one of the few movies from the 30s where I actually feel like the power dynamics aren't really one way or the other. Like I
actually think she has more. Except in the very end, he's able to do something that she can't do.
Right. That's why
that's because of her government, which is a really hard thing to overcome.
Right. And it's like, I feel like it's relatively equal. Maybe she has more power than him to a degree because he's almost more of like, he spends all his money. He's kind of almost a kept man to some degree by the Duchess or whatever her title is. And like, I find that refreshing for a movie from the 30s. Even the good ones, like It Happened One Night, they're not really an equal, not really an equal power dynamic there, even though she has more money.
Not with that plot. In a different situation, she would have had more power in It Happened.
Yes,
but
so it's like I like
the fish out of water in that story.
Right, and I like that Greta Garbo, Ninotchka, has more or at least equal power. Even her character arc isn't like she loses her power. Her character arc is like, it's, I guess, about loosening up, which is kind of the stereotype for the frigid, Soviet, cold, frozen woman. But like, I kind of don't mind because it doesn't feel like she loses her practicality. She just
right, and it feels like there's a whole hysterical subplot with his butler.
Yeah.
Where he's like trying now that she's shown him that his butler doesn't really want to be a butler, like he's trying to free his butler, and his butler is honestly this older man who's like, I don't want, like, I'm too old for this shit, basically.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah.
So again, I didn't necessarily feel like she was being changed so much as she was letting herself be vulnerable, and that's a change. I'm splitting hairs a little bit, but it's different than like changing her whole worldview or changing who she is fundamentally. And she changed him too, in that he was like
She
thinking
doesn't
about wealth inequality and his butler.
she doesn't go from having straight hair to curly hair.
Oh, thank God. Yes.
Like it's that thing where it's like she does make a change, but it is more about vulnerability and maybe there is a bit of a loosening up the frigidness, but it's not. It doesn't seem to be at the expense of her practicality. We don't really get a story where we see beyond what they're doing together. Like
Yeah.
who knows what she's going to do at the end of the movie now that she is with
Yeah.
her man. Now that she's going to defect pretty much. So it's like, but it's you feel like she's not going to lose her practicality. She's not going to suddenly become a
But it's
wimp or
like
something.
she was a cool bitch kind of a thing. And I mean, it may be inappropriate to call a woman a bitch, but like she was a cool lady, a
Yeah.
tough ass lady. And he recognized that. It's not that he saw someone who could become a tough ass lady if he were there. It's like, no, he's recognizing how awesome she is, and she's warming up to him for that reason, and that's what I like.
I even like the fact that like she kind of needs him because she does kind of need someone who's a little more fun and lighthearted, and he kind of
Yeah.
needs her because she is practical and
I've-
strong, and he needs a strong woman.
I've told you, I like nice guys with tough ladies, edgy ladies. I like that as a combo. So
Yeah.
I tried that.
I feel like there.
I'm sorry, you go.
I feel like there was something else I was going to say, and I can't for the life of me remember it. So
I think I've covered everything. I mean, it's interesting because you were asking me Robot Monster versus Ninotchka, and It Happened One Night, but I don't even know It Happened One Night versus Ninotchka. Ninotchka is pretty brilliant and it's pretty great. But It Happened One Night is it's like the best fluff, and it's really, they're both really good. I would say Ninotchka stands out because of its political commentary and the time it was made in. But if you just want to watch a movie, like either one is really good.
Yeah, this is another one where like maybe if you don't like rom-coms, you might want to watch this anyways because it's kind of an interesting movie. There's a bunch of
I feel like this would appeal to people who just had an interest in a lot of film things.
Yeah,
I agree. It might have a. I feel like It Happened One Night would appeal to a broader audience in some ways, and yet Ninotchka might appeal to a broader film audience, like
I agree.
Snob audience. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, no, that's totally. I agree with you. That's kind of how it feels like. So go watch this.
Yeah, really.